Yes, we have the entity in those relations with the universe and universal forces, as are latent and exhibited manifestedly in the entity. In entering astrologically, we find the entity coming under the influences of Venus, Jupiter, Uranus, Mercury. In those builded through the application of all's influence in the entity's earthly experiences, these would be at variance to some of the astrological aspects, yet may be applied in the present experience as a development in material, mental and spiritual or soul forces. These, as we find, are innate, with their expressions or manifestations being developed in the present experience. In Venus we find the love of home, of companions, of friends and close relations, yet in Jupiter these, as we find, will only reach into the wider fields of manifested expression in the middle or the latter portion of the present experiences, and this dependent upon the application of all's influences, for there will come in the experience of the entity many places when choice of circumstance, conditions, surroundings, will be made, and the choice by self must be manifested. These, as we would see, would make for the changing in the environment. The change in the manner in which those forces as express themselves may be manifestedly made, either in the fields that find expression for those of the arts in the life, or those as make for ties that bind, that make for duties or for varied relationships as respecting individuals, peoples, conditions, things, surroundings. In the influences as seen in those of the occult, these bring that influence that makes for wonderment or indecision at times, and where little conditions make for wrath, misunderstanding, or temperamental conditions, as they may be classed, through the activities of the body physical or mental, make for differences arising in the individual as to relationships. Yet in those of Mercurian there will be brought, in the latter portion or middle portion of the present experience, a determination in the mental abilities that will make for the bettered conditions in the individual's present experience. In the influences that are innate, then, these may be better classified as to their relationships as come from the experiences, and their influences in the present experience. These, in a general manner, are those influences as innate, and may be made manifested, or they may be passed aside lightly. One that holds friendships when once made, or the tendency is to be slow in change, and an indecision when new conditions, circumstances or things arise in the entity's experience. Choosing often to depend upon advice of others rather than being able to make decisions within self. One inclined towards those things of the art as pertain to creative forces, as related to those things that make for manifestations of material as well as of the ethereal conditions and the experiences of individuals. One that finds the conditions as relate to things, whether of an economic influence or whether those of making decisions as relating to conditions or peoples, slow to make any change. In the conditions as made for the commercial forces in life tend to those that make for conditions as of patterns, and samples, models, or such, and the entity would make an excellent wallpaper decorator. In the one before this we find during that period when there were rebellions or oppressions in the land known as the French. The entity was among those peoples who were in touch with those in authority as rulers. GD's note 760 and 5618, for the entity that one of the offspring to whom these peoples went upon their attempt to escape from the land. The entity then in the name Elysium. In this experience the entity gained in a mental development, lost in those things as pertain to grudges, as of contentions. Hence the entity often finds, rather than to become contentious with one, the entity will cease to speak or to act. Not that the aversion is not held innately. Rather does the entity sulk. Best to be outspoken and have it done with, rather than to leave impressions that are not understood by self nor by others. In the developments for same, these may be applied in self in a manner as to apply will forces, for when such conditions or such contentions, or such dissensions arise, think and speak and then act. Don't act first and think and speak afterwards, and be sorry, or sulk. In the one before this we find in that period known as the Grecian highest development period, when there was the beginning of the understandings from the various schools of thought. The entity was then among those, even though of the women of the day, that were well spoken of as to their abilities to think or to act. Beautiful in body, in mind, in activities. The entity gained through this experience, and in the name Axoshia. The entity excelled much in the arts of the periods as pertained to the dance, as well as to the sculpturing of the day. Hence moulding, and such, make for the entity an interest that is sometimes hard to be understood, even by self, and most by others. The moulds of such figures, or those that represent many of the muses or of the figures of that period, may easily be interpreted by the entity, yet the entity often feels a hesitancy in giving expression of that to which such figures, such statuary, such pictures, or such depicting of conditions or periods, or elements of mental forces, mean or bearing into the body's experience, for fear of being made fun of, or of being spoken of in an unseemly manner. This received not from that experience, for boldness was obtained from that experience, and the entity often feels within self that, would it dare to do that which it really feels it can do, it would accomplish a great deal more than it does. In this activity may the entity find that with the expression of self, in the abilities to manifest or speak that as is felt or thought, may the entity gain much for self that will make for a contentment that will be in a developing way and manner. In the one before this we find in that period known now as Egypt, and in those times when there were divisions, and when there were the making of many of the mounds, the symbols, and the various edifices of the land. The entity was close in contact then with those in charge, or the builders of those periods, and the entity gained much through the associations of the peoples as builded in the land. Not only as the builders of the edifices, but the building of the relationships as existed between individuals as individuals, and the individuals' relationships to the creative force, and a manifested way and manner of expressing same, brought thoughts, contemplation, and the period of development to the entity, in the name aspies. The entity used same, in the latter portion of the experience, to self's own detriment, for with the passing of those to whom the entity felt the closest drawn, the entity separated itself from those peoples, and established in the southernmost portion of the land a kingdom of their own ruling in same for an eon and more. In the present experience those conditions of the land mean much to the entity, and the variations that have come to the entity in feelings as seen in the Egyptians, towards dance, or those forces as made for manifestations in replicas of those conditions that were taught mean much to the entity, yet some hesitancy is often felt. A study of same will bring to the entity a closer relationship with many that the entity associated with during that period. In the one before this we find in that land known as the Atlantean period, and during that time when much of the peoples were in the position of using all the forces in nature. The entity was then of the princesses of the land, and in power, in authority, in one close to those that ruled the land. The entity then in these, luxury, comforts of the material forces, and in a portion of the experience did that which to the peoples even, and to self brought distrust in others and in self. In the name as me did the entity become the ruler of fire, and of those forces in nature that had to do with fire and its origins. Hence a tendency, and a warning to the entity, beware that the lungs, C24-1, and that makes fires of the body does not consume same in an unseemly manner. Beware, then, as respecting those distresses in same. Keep as much in the open as possible, but not in night air, neither in those things that tire or unfit, or eat up those forces of the physical body, else the mental and spiritual may not have that opportunity in the present experience to develop or manifest that as is toward that universal force that is set in each and every entity. In the abilities of the entity in the present, these, as seen, will lie and will come in varied fields during the varied experiences or developing periods of the entity's present experience. The entity may make the success in a commercial field, or the entity may make the success in the home field. While these for the entity may not be wholly combined, nor wholly kept apart, yet those that make for the engaging forces that may be builded in self. For building the home is the greater success for the entity, or for anyone, through these experiences. Keep, then, an ideal, not an idea. Oft may it be asked, what is an ideal? That's not made with hands. But that is eternal, that is an ideal. Keep self in accord, in attune with those forces as may make manifest through self in mental and spiritual manners, and this will keep one in attune with an ideal as may be set before self. Being true first to self, will prevent self from being forced to anyone. Be not too close-mouthed in expression of thoughts, for in the use of that as is held or known, or had in hand, is development obtained. Know in whom thou hast believed, knowing he is able to keep that which is committed unto thee against any experience. Keep self unspotted, but be not sulky in doing so. Ready for questions. Q. In the Egyptian period, was the entity associated with the ibex ruler in any way? 78. A. In aversion with two of the rulers in ibex. Rather in the builders of those that represented the various figures, the various temples in the land. Hence the choosing of those of a kingdom of its own with the different peoples, in the latter portion of the experience there. We are through for the present.